November rain hammers against the tall windows of Los Angeles Superior Court, each drop striking the glass like an accusation. Gray light washes over mahogany paneling and brass fixtures worn smooth by decades of desperate pleas. The room smells like old paper and fear and the faint chemical burn of industrial cleaner. Valentina Vasquez sits alone at the defendant's table. She is 29 years old but looks 40. Her dark hair, still damp from the rain outside, is pulled back so tightly it seems to stretch the skin across her cheekbones. She wears a faded blue dress, the only clean thing she owns, with frayed cuffs and a collar that no longer holds its shape. Her hands rest on the wooden table in front of her, and they will not stop trembling. They haven't stopped trembling for 3 days. The prosecutor, a woman with a sharp voice and sharper teeth, reads from a document without looking up. The defendant is charged with grand theft of property valued at $15,000. Specifically, a diamond bracelet, 3 rings, and a vintage watch, all belonging to the estate of Dominic Calabrese, stolen on or about October 23rd of this year. $15,000. The number sits in the courtroom like a stone. Valentina has never seen $15,000 in her life. She does not own $15,000. She does not earn $15,000. She has $2 in her pocket right now. 2. In the gallery behind her, 3 rows back, Sophie Langford sits with her legs crossed and her mouth curved into a smile so small only someone looking for it would see it. Sophie Langford is a woman of 52 who has spent her entire life making sure the world knows she is beautiful, wealthy, and never, ever wrong. Her cream Chanel suit costs more than Valentina's annual salary. Her diamond earrings catch the courtroom light and throw it back in fractured rainbows. She leans back in her chair like a woman watching her favorite movie reach its perfect ending. Valentina's public defender sits beside her. His name is David Chen, and he has been a public defender for 17 years, which means he has stopped believing in justice and now only believes in deals. His tie has a coffee stain shaped like a continent. He whispered to her before the judge entered the room, "Plead guilty. Reduce your sentence." No jury will ever believe a maid over a woman like Sophie Langford. That's not cynicism, Valentina. That's mathematics. Judge Carmen Martinez sits at the bench, a woman in black robes with iron-gray hair and eyes that have seen every possible lie a human being can tell. She has been a judge for 19 years, and in that time, she has learned that the world sorts itself into 2 categories: people the system protects, and people the system destroys. She asks the question that will change everything. Does the defendant wish to make a statement? Valentina stands. Her knees are water. Her heart is a trap bird. She opens her mouth, and what comes out is barely a whisper, a voice like a candle in the wind, fragile enough to break. Your Honor, I did not take anything. I have worked in the Calabrese household for 8 years. I have never stolen. I would never. The courtroom door slams open. The sound cracks through the room like a gunshot, and every single head turns in unison. The bailiff's hand drifts toward his weapon. The judge's pen stops mid-word. The prosecutor looks up from her document with genuine surprise etched across her face. Dominic Calabrese stands in the doorway like a man who has just walked through a storm. He has. Rain drips from the shoulders of his suit, a black Bryony that costs more than Valentina makes in 5 years. His Italian leather shoes are pooling water on the courtroom floor, and he does not care. His dark eyes scan the room with the precision of a man who has spent 37 years learning to identify threats, and what he sees in this moment, the fear in the bailiff, the shock on the prosecutor's face, the satisfaction in Sophie Langford's expression, confirms what he already knows. Behind him, Marco and Theo flank the entrance like stone guardians. Marco is broad-shouldered and tattooed, with grey threading through his black hair at the temples. Theo is younger, sharper, built like a knife. Their eyes move across the courtroom in synchronized sweeps, tactical, predatory, missing nothing. In 15 years of working for Dominic Calabrese, Marco has never been inside a courthouse with him. Dominic sends lawyers. Dominic sends money. Dominic makes problems disappear before they ever reach a judge. Dominic does not arrive in person. Dominic does not stand in rain-soaked suits and dripping water on courthouse floors. Something is different. Something is wrong. Or perhaps something is finally, impossibly, right. Dominic steps further into the room, and the silence gets deeper, wider, more complete. His suit is tailored to emphasize the width of his shoulders and the flatness of his stomach. His white shirt is open 2 buttons at the chest, showing dark hair and the edge of a scar that runs from his collarbone toward his heart. A gold watch sits on his wrist, heavy and old, passed down through generations of men who carried power the way other men carried briefcases. His face is the face of someone who has made terrible decisions and lived with every consequence. Sharp angles, dark stubble, eyes the color of storm clouds just before lightning strikes. There is a scar that runs from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, thin and precise, like someone took a blade and drew it with intention. Valentina, standing at the defendant's table in her faded blue dress, looks at him. Their eyes meet. Just for a moment. Just long enough for something to shift in the courtroom, some invisible atmospheric change, like the pressure dropping before thunder. Judge Martinez finds her voice. It is cooler now, more careful. Sir, you cannot simply enter a courtroom without permission. I'm going to need to ask you to. Dominic does not acknowledge her. His eyes do not leave Valentina's face. When he speaks, his voice is deep and solid like an oath, controlled but with something volcanic beneath it, something that sounds like a threat wrapped in respect. Your Honor, I need to speak. Sophie Langford's smile fades. The prosecutor opens her mouth and closes it again, like a fish searching for water. Judge Martinez leans forward slightly, and in that moment, every person in the courtroom understands something fundamental about power, that it does not announce itself through volume or aggression. True power enters quietly, takes up space, and makes the rules reshape themselves around it. This court is not open to unrequested testimony from. Valentina Vasquez did not steal from me. Dominic's voice cuts through her words like a blade. I am here to testify to that fact. Under oath, if required. I am also here to provide evidence that these charges were fabricated by a woman with a vendetta, and that this innocent woman has been falsely accused to serve a personal agenda. The silence in the courtroom is so complete you can hear the rain against the windows, each individual drop announcing itself to the world. Sophie Langford's face has gone pale. Her hand grips the armrest of the bench beside her so tightly her knuckles turn white. Marco and Theo exchange a glance, the kind of glance that passes between men who have known each other for decades and need no words to communicate shock, confusion, and the understanding that something fundamental has cracked open. In all their years working for him, they have never seen him do this. Never seen him enter a room on behalf of someone else. Never seen him risk his presence, his time, his political capital on a woman he claims he barely knows. But what neither of them understands is what happened 2 weeks ago, in the underground parking garage of his mansion at 11:51 p.m. on a November night. What they do not know is that Dominic Calabrese watched from the shadows as Valentina Vasquez, a maid in a black and white uniform whose name he did not even know, placed her body between armed men and a bleeding teenage boy. He watched her speak in a voice so steady it stopped the men cold. He watched her choose a stranger's child over her own safety, with no calculation, no expectation of reward, no fear of consequence. And in that moment, something inside Dominic Calabrese that had been dead for 37 years moved. The door to the courtroom stands open behind him, and the rain continues to fall outside, washing the streets of Los Angeles clean. Now, let us go back. Let us go back 8 years, to the day Valentina Vasquez first walked through the service entrance of the Calabrese mansion with nothing but $47 in her pocket, bruises she would spend years learning to hide, and no idea that she was walking toward the moment that would eventually bring her to this courtroom, to this man, to this impossible turning point. Let us understand how a woman becomes invisible, and how one man finally learned to see. 8 years earlier. The service entrance of the Calabrese estate in the Los Feliz neighborhood. The house is a fortress made of white stone and glass, built on a hill that overlooks Los Angeles like a god surveying everything beneath it. The property spans 2 acres. The main residence has 7 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, and a kitchen that costs more than some people's homes. Valentina Vasquez walks through the service entrance in a dress that no longer fits her properly because she has lost weight in ways that have nothing to do with intentional dieting. Her dark hair is pinned back. Her eyes are the color of wet earth, and they are hollow. Not from lack of sleep, though she sleeps only 4 hours a night. Hollow from the kind of exhaustion that settles into the bones and lives there permanently, the exhaustion of survival, of choosing between medicine and rent, of being 21 years old and already understanding that the world has decided what you are worth. The woman who hired her is named Patricia, the estate manager. Patricia is in her 60s and has worked for the Calabrese family for 32 years. She is kind in the way that people who have very little power left can be kind. She doesn't have the energy to be cruel, so she offers small courtesies instead. She shows Valentina to the service quarters, a small room off the kitchen with a narrow bed and a window that looks out onto the gardens. The pay is $2,000 a month, Patricia says, and Valentina's breath catches. $2,000 a month. She could live on that. She could actually live. The hours are 6 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, 6 days a week. Your job is to clean the main floors, dust the common areas, and keep the marble in the entryway pristine. Mr. Calabrese values order and cleanliness. He won't notice you if you do your job right. That's the goal. Invisibility is a gift in this house. Valentina nods. She understands invisibility. She has been practicing it her entire adult life. There's one other thing, Patricia adds. Mr. Calabrese has a daughter. Ava. She's 7 years old. Her mother doesn't live here anymore. Sometimes Ava needs help with her lunch, or someone to sit with her if she's frightened. You're not the nanny, but when you see her, be kind. Will you do that? Valentina thinks of the girls she used to work with before this job, before she came to Los Angeles, before her ex-boyfriend Marcus Webb made sure no one in her hometown would hire her because he knew the police officers, because he had money, because she had made the mistake of trying to leave him and they didn't like that very much. Yes, Valentina whispers. I will be kind to her. That night, lying on the narrow bed in the service quarters, Valentina counts her money. She has $47 remaining in the world. This job will change that. This job will save her life. She does not know that in 8 years, she will stand in a courtroom accused of stealing $15,000. She does not know that a man with storm gray eyes will stand in the rain, soaked and furious, because he finally saw her. She does not know that her greatest act of courage will happen in a dark parking garage, and that it will change everything. Right now, she simply sleeps the deepest sleep she has slept in 3 years. The marble floor stretched before her like a frozen mirror, and Valentina Vasquez was on her knees, her brush moving in small, precise circles, when the voices arrived. It was 6 a.m. The mansion was still dark except for the foyer lights that caught the polish and threw it back up at the vaulted ceiling. She had been scrubbing the same section for 20 minutes, not because it was dirty, but because invisibility required patience. You had to move slowly enough that people's eyes slid past you. The voices came from the east hallway. Deep voices. Male. Speaking rapid Italian that she did not understand but could feel, sharp consonants cutting through the morning quiet like blades. Her brush froze. 3 men entered the foyer, their footsteps hollow on the marble. The sound echoed, tap, 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 tap. Professional shoes on expensive stone. She kept her head down, her eyes fixed on the floor 6 inches from her knees, but she could see their silhouettes stretched across the white marble like dark ghosts. The man in the center was tall, 6'1" at least, broad across the shoulders in a way that suggested not the gym but years of carrying weight that had nothing to do with muscle. His suit was charcoal gray, the fabric expensive enough that it moved like water when he walked. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and when he spoke into the phone pressed to his ear, his voice came out deep and solid like an oath, each word measured and final. "Non adesso," he said. "Not now." Then, "Risolviamolo domani." "We'll handle it tomorrow." He did not look down. Valentina existed in the space between his eyes and the ground, and in that space, she was nothing. A cleaning tool. A fixture. The way you don't see the door frame when you walk through a door. The three men crossed the foyer and disappeared into the study. A door closed. The sound swallowed the silence whole. She exhaled. She had not realized she was holding her breath. Her hands were trembling when she dipped the brush back into the soapy water. The bucket was already cold. She would need to change it in 15 minutes, but not yet. Not while they were here. She had learned in her first week never to move while the men were in the house. Movement drew attention. Attention was dangerous. The brush resumed its circles. Round and round, the bristles catching the light. She had $2 in her pocket, literally all the money she possessed in the world. The other $45 that Mrs. Chen had paid her on Friday was already spent, $30 on rent, $8 on groceries, $7 on the bus pass. She had miscalculated somewhere. She always miscalculated. There was never enough math in the world to make her poverty stop multiplying. But this job, $600 a week, would change that. Would change everything. In 1 year, she could save $15,000. In 2 years, $30,000. In 5 years, enough to rent a nicer apartment, one where the landlord didn't ask questions about the bruises on her arms, one where the walls were thicker and the neighbors couldn't hear her crying through the night. She had plans. She had been making plans since the day Marcus Webb first smiled at her through the window of that silver BMW. That was 3 years ago now. 3 years since she had made the mistake of getting in his car. Valentina finished the foyer section by 7 a.m. and moved to the east corridor, where the sunlight was just beginning to filter through the tall windows. She could hear Mrs. Chen in the kitchen now, the clink of pots, the hum of the refrigerator being opened and closed. Somewhere in the house, a child was crying. A soft, distant sound, like something small and frightened calling for help that would never come. She paused. The crying continued for another 10 seconds, then stopped abruptly, as if the child had remembered that crying was pointless. She knew that feeling. By the time she left the mansion at 2 p.m., her back ached in the specific way that meant her body was remembering what her mind tried to forget. The bruises from last week were still visible if she looked, dark purple fading to yellow at the edges, fingerprints on her ribs where Marcus had grabbed her and twisted, the way he always twisted, like he was trying to wring the disobedience out of her the way you wring water from a cloth. She had tried to leave him that morning. She had simply said, "I'm going to my mother's house," and he had smiled, that smile that didn't reach his eyes, and said, "No, you're not." So she hadn't. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. She sat in the back, her black and white uniform still on because changing into her regular clothes took energy she didn't have. The other passengers ignored her? She was the kind of invisible that happened when you were too tired to take up space, when your exhaustion made you small enough to disappear. Her apartment was on the 4th floor of a building where the elevator hadn't worked since March. She climbed the stairs slowly, her hand trailing along the wall, which was sticky with something she didn't want to identify. The hallway smelled like old cooking oil and something else, something like mold, or rot, or the specific smell of poverty, which was really just the smell of things being left to decay because fixing them cost money. Her key was sticky in the lock, the mechanism had swollen from humidity. She jiggled it, pushed the door, and stepped into the 300-square-foot studio apartment that cost $400 a month and was the nicest place she had ever lived. The first thing she did was count the money in the coffee can under the sink. $62.37. She added the $5 bill from her pocket, tips from Mrs. Chen's friends who occasionally came through and left coins on the kitchen counter without looking at her, and updated the total. $67.37. She was $200,000 away from safe. Not even close. That night, she lay in the narrow bed that took up most of the apartment's sleeping space, and she thought about the man in the gray suit. She had seen him only once, and for only a few seconds, but something about the way he moved, the absolute certainty in every step, the way his shoes didn't hesitate on the marble, suggested that he was the kind of person who never had to count money. The kind of person who made other people count money for him. She wondered what that felt like. To have enough. To have security that came built into the suit itself. She didn't know his name yet. She wouldn't learn it for another 6 months, when she overheard Marco and Theo speaking in the library. They were talking about shipments, about a rival territory, about someone named Calabrese who had finally made his move. She didn't piece it together until she realized they were talking about him, the grey suit, the voice like thunder, the man who existed in the spaces she was trained to disappear into. Dominic Calabrese. Boss of the Calabrese organization, which controlled everything from the docks to the downtown casinos. A man who, at 34 years old, had already accumulated more power and wealth than most people could comprehend in a lifetime. He remained invisible to him, and she would continue to be invisible to him, for the next 7 years. She would watch him age slightly, the grey at his temples spreading like something spreading through snow. She would see him with women sometimes, beautiful women who wore dresses that cost more than her annual salary, but he never held their hands, never touched them the way a man in love would touch someone. He held them the way you hold things you're about to put down. Meanwhile, in the world she tried not to live in, Marcus Webb was getting impatient. He knew about the mansion job now. He had followed her there once, parking across the street, watching her disappear through the service entrance at the back. He had written down the address in a small black notebook, the same notebook where he kept phone numbers of people who owed him money, people who had betrayed him, people who needed to understand that there were consequences to saying no to him. She was in that notebook now. And Marcus Webb, who had learned from the 3 police officers who kept his secrets that patience was a weapon, decided to give her 1 more year before he would make her understand what it meant to leave him. 1 more year of believing she might actually escape. 1 more year before everything she was building would burn. The underground parking garage of the Calabrese mansion breathes cold and shadow at 11:53 p.m. Fluorescent lights flicker overhead, casting everything in sickly yellow, the concrete floor slick from recent cleaning, black SUVs lined like sleeping predators, a silver Mercedes reflecting light that seems to die before reaching it. Valentina Vasquez pushes through the steel door with 2 heavy trash bags, one in each hand, her shoes echoing against concrete in that empty way that makes sound feel louder than it should. She has stayed past her shift. Mrs. Chen needed the dining room deep cleaned after the dinner party, and Valentina cannot afford to say no to extra hours. $120. That brings her to $9 for the week. $9 until Friday. The dumpster is in the corner, past a black Escalade and around a concrete pillar where the security cameras do not quite reach. She moves toward it, her shoulders hunched against air conditioning that blasts cold like a punishment. The rain outside falls in sheets, visible through the garage entrance, turning the November night into something that looks like drowning from the inside. That is when she hears it. A cry. Muffled, young, raw with terror. Valentina freezes mid-step. Her body knows this sound. She made this sound once, in the dark, when Marcus held her down and asked questions she could not answer. The trash bags go slack in her hands. Around the concrete pillar, 4 men in black clothes surround a teenager, 15, maybe 16, his face a map of fresh blood, his hands zip-tied behind his back. One of the men has a gun pressed to the boy's temple. Another speaks into a phone, his voice casual, which makes it worse, "We got the kid. Sending the message now." The boy is crying in broken English and Spanish. Begging. His voice breaks on every word. Valentina should turn around. She has survived 8 years by understanding exactly when to disappear. Invisibility is a skill she has perfected. But something in that boy's voice, something that sounds like her own terror from 3 years ago, from 5 years ago, from the night she understood that some men keep weapons the way other men keep promises, makes her move without permission from her rational mind. She drops the trash bags. The sound echoes like a gunshot. All 4 men turn. Their hands move to weapons. "Who the hell are you?" The one with the gun speaks first, his eyes scanning this tiny woman in a black and white uniform, her hair falling from its bun, her hands shaking so badly she clasps them together to keep them still. Valentina steps forward. Her heart tries to break through her ribs. Her voice comes out steady, and she does not understand how that is possible. Let him go. The men stare. One of them laughs, a short, dismissive sound. Lady, walk away before you get hurt. Valentina moves between the gun and the boy. Her body becomes a shield. Her mind screams that this is how she dies, but her feet refuse to move backward. Let him go. 3 seconds pass. In those 3 seconds, the man with the gun raises the weapon toward her face. Then a voice cuts through the garage cold as a blade wrapped in ice. Lower the weapon. Dominic Calabrese steps into the fluorescent light. He is not alone. Marco and Theo flank him, their faces blank in the way of men trained to show nothing. But Dominic's eyes, storm gray, burning, lock directly on Valentina. Those eyes show everything. They show shock. They show something breaking inside him that he thought had calcified years ago. The 4 men lower their weapons immediately, stammering apologies that Dominic does not hear. He is looking at this woman who cleans his floors, who he has never truly seen, who just placed her body between a gun and a stranger's child without calculation, without asking what she would gain, without weighing the cost. For the first time in his adult life, he sees someone act without fear of consequence. Take the boy to the medical room, Dominic says quietly. Discreetly. Marco, handle them. Then to Valentina, his voice different, softer, like something thawing, come with me. She follows him through the mansion's back corridors, up a service staircase, into his private study that she has cleaned 100 times but never entered while he was present. Dark wood. Leather chairs worn soft with use. Books lining walls. A single photograph on the desk, a man who looks like an older version of Dominic, smiling, frozen in a moment before tragedy rewrote everything. Rain hammers the windows. Dominic pours 2 glasses of whiskey. His hands are steady in a way that makes her understand he has practiced being calm in crisis so many times it has become armor. He hands her one. She takes it with shaking hands, does not drink. What you did tonight, he begins, then stops. Restarts. Why would you do that? Valentina looks at the floor. At the expensive rug beneath her feet that costs more than 3 months of her rent. He was just a kid. Men with guns were going to kill you. I know. Then why? His voice carries genuine confusion, as if he is trying to understand a language he has never heard spoken. She finally meets his eyes. They are closer than she realized. Because nobody helped me when I needed it. I couldn't just walk away from that. Something in Dominic's chest cracks. Just slightly. Just enough that he has to look away. He pours himself another whiskey. You have worked here 8 years. Yes, sir. I never knew your name. Shame colors his voice in a way she did not expect from a man like him. Shame is an admission of failure, and men with power do not usually allow themselves to fail, or to say so aloud. Valentina Vasquez. He sits heavily in his chair, and for the first time she sees him not as the untouchable boss but as a man carrying weight he cannot set down. The gray at his temples catches the light. His shoulders, broad and powerful, somehow seem heavier than they should. That boy you saved tonight, Ava's cousin. My nephew. They took him 3 hours ago. I have been tearing the city apart looking for him. Valentina nods slowly. Understanding settles into her. She did not save a stranger's child. She saved his family. His blood. Marco appears in the doorway at that moment, and his face shows something close to shock. In 15 years of working for Dominic Calabrese, Marco has never seen him bring anyone into this room. Never. The study is where Dominic exists alone, or with lieutenants bearing reports of territory and money and bodies. Not with women. Not with the help. Boss? Marco's voice carries a question that Dominic ignores. Leave us. Over the next hour, in halting fragments, Valentina tells him pieces of her story. Not everything. Not the scars running in every direction like a map of hell, not the night she could not close her legs because the pain was too much, not the name of the man who taught her that love and violence sometimes look the same to someone who has never experienced the difference. But enough. The apartment where the heat barely works. The $2 in her pocket more times than she can count. The way she has survived by being invisible, by making herself so small that powerful people forget she exists. Dominic listens with his hands steepled, his expression unreadable as granite. When she finishes, he says, "You need money." She stiffens immediately. "I am not asking for anything. I should go." "How much do you need?" "Mr. Calabrese, I did not do this for money. I should not even be here. I should go back to my apartment and—" "How much?" His voice is gentle but immovable, like a door that has already been locked from the other side. "There are medical bills. From a few years ago. $47,000. But I have a payment plan. I am managing. I do not need." He picks up his phone, types something with 2 fingers, sets it down. The action is smooth and complete, like a sentence ending with a period. "It is paid." Valentina's head snaps up. "What? No. No, you cannot, that is not possible. I did not help you for money. I did not. It is done. Why would you help me? I am nobody. I clean your floors." Dominic stands and walks to the window, his back to her. Rain streams down the glass in rivers that look like tears. The city is crying. "My father was murdered when I was 17 years old. I watched it happen. I hid like a coward while 3 men shot him 3 times. His voice is raw in a way that tells her this is not a story he usually tells. "You stepped between a gun and a child without hesitating. You risked everything for a stranger. That is not the action of nobody, Valentina. That is the action of someone with a soul worth protecting." The moment stretches between them, fragile as glass. Then his phone buzzes. He checks it, and his entire body goes rigid. "I have to handle something. Marco will drive you home. We will talk more tomorrow." He does not look at her as he says it. But what she does not understand is that downstairs, in the underground poker room thick with cigar smoke and green felt tables, his lieutenants are counting $200,000 in cash, territory won from rivals, leverage accumulated, power measured in hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands. And in her apartment, 5 blocks away, Marcus Webb is standing in her living room with a gun and a worn prayer card in his other hand, his smile patient and cruel. Meanwhile, in a high-rise downtown, Sophie Langford sits at her vanity and examines her reflection with the precision of a surgeon. She has just hung up the phone with the police. She has just filed a report about a missing diamond bracelet, $15,000, stolen from the Calabrese guest room. She has just laid the perfect trap, the kind that catches women like Valentina, women with no money for lawyers, women who will stand alone in front of a judge with no one to stand beside them. She saw Dominic bring that cleaning girl into his study. She saw it with her own eyes from the surveillance camera in the hallway. And she knows Dominic well enough to understand that something changed. Something thawed. Jealousy, as it always does, reaches out and touches everything within reach. The night settles into Los Angeles like a predator finding rest. Somewhere, a siren wails. Somewhere else, a door unlocks. Somewhere in between, a countdown begins. 5 days until the court hearing. 5 days until Valentina Vasquez stands alone before a judge who will not believe her. 5 days until a deadline expires and a man with a gun decides that patience has served its purpose. And in the Calabrese mansion, Dominic stands at his office window and watches the rain, understanding that the woman who cleaned his floors has somehow become the only thing in his entire empire that he cannot allow to break. The courtroom falls silent the moment Dominic Calabrese walks through the doors. His footsteps echo against marble floors like a judge's gavel striking wood. Judge Martinez blinks, her pen frozen mid-note. The prosecutor's jaw tightens. Marco, standing in the back row with his arms crossed, lowers his head slightly, not in respect, but in recognition that something has shifted in the gravitational field of the room. Dominic does not wear black today. He wears a charcoal suit tailored to perfection, the kind that costs more than Valentina makes in a year, with an open white shirt revealing his chest. A scar runs from his left eye to his cheekbone, pale and deliberate, like a blade wrapped in memory. His eyes are storm grey, the color of rain before thunder. He walks down the center aisle, and the air itself seems to compress around him. Sophie Langford's hands grip her purse so tightly her knuckles turn white. Her face drains of color like water down a sink. She understands immediately what his presence means, not just a witness, but a declaration. "Your Honor," Judge Martinez says carefully, removing her glasses. "This is highly irregular. You're not listed as a party in this case." Dominic turns to face her with the courtesy of a man who has never needed to demand anything. "I'm a witness to character," he says, his voice deep and solid like an oath. "And I believe the court needs to hear what I have to say. Mr. Calabrese." The judge gestures to the witness stand. "You understand you're under oath?" "I do." He walks to the stand. The bailiff administers the oath. Dominic's hand rests on the Bible, steady and unmoved. When he sits, every person in the courtroom leans forward, drawn by the gravity of his presence like objects pulled into orbit. The prosecutor, a thin man named Harrison with nervous eyes, stands. "Mr. Calabrese, you employ Miss Vasquez as household staff, is that correct?" "For 8 years," Dominic says. 8 years, during which she has had access to my home, my valuables, my family. And in that time, not a single item has gone missing. Dominic cuts him off, his tone final as a closing door. Not a piece of art. Not a single diamond. Not the bracelet in question, which my ex-wife claims was stolen from my guest room. The prosecutor's face flushes. "Mr. Calabrese, the evidence suggests." "There is no evidence," Dominic says, turning slightly to look directly at Sophie. "There is an accusation from a woman motivated by personal jealousy. Nothing more." Sophie stands abruptly, her voice sharp as breaking glass. "This is absurd. Your Honor, he's clearly biased. He's obviously involved with this woman." "Ms. Langford, sit down," Judge Martinez says quietly, but her tone carries the weight of the court itself. Dominic's eyes remain on Sophie for 3 long seconds. In those seconds, he does not speak. He does not move. He simply looks at her with the expression of a man observing something beneath his notice. It is worse than any words could be. 3 nights ago, Dominic continues, returning his gaze to the judge, Miss Vasquez placed herself between armed men and a 15-year-old boy. My nephew. She had nothing to gain. She had everything to lose. She did it because that is who she is. Not a thief. A woman with more courage in her smallest finger than most people possess in their entire lives. Valentina's hands tremble in her lap. She does not look up. She cannot. The sound of her own heartbeat fills her ears like thunder. Your Honor, the prosecutor tries again, shuffling papers desperately. The bracelet was discovered in the staff break room. There are witnesses to. Planted, Dominic says flatly. By someone with access to the mansion and motive to harm Miss Vasquez. Someone who saw her speaking to me and allowed jealousy to override conscience. Judge Martinez leans back in her chair, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding. She removes her glasses entirely and rubs the bridge of her nose. Do you have evidence of this planting, Mr. Calabrese? Security footage from the hallway outside the staff room, Dominic says. Time-stamped. Clear as daylight. My lawyer has already provided it to the court. The prosecutor's face goes grey. He looks at Judge Martinez. She looks at him. The silence stretches like wire pulled tight. Without physical evidence tying Miss Vasquez to this bracelet, and with the character testimony of Mr. Calabrese, Judge Martinez pauses, choosing her words carefully. And given that the alleged theft was reported by a potentially biased witness, I am dismissing all charges against Valentina Vasquez, effective immediately. The gavel strikes once. Dominic rises from the witness stand and walks directly to where Valentina sits. She still cannot look at him. She is afraid if she does, she will shatter like glass. "Come on," he says softly, extending his hand. His voice carries no command, only gentleness. "Let's get you out of here." She takes his hand. His grip is warm and steady, real in a way that nothing else has been for 8 years. He pulls her to her feet, and for a moment, they stand close enough that she can smell him, expensive cologne mixed with something warmer, something human underneath. Then the courtroom doors slam open with such force that the hinges rattle. Marcus Webb stands in the frame, wild-eyed and breathing hard. His hair is disheveled. His jacket is torn at the seam. He looks like a man who has been unraveling for days and has finally come completely undone. "Valentina!" His voice cracks across the room like a whip. "We're not done." He pulls a gun from his jacket, a small revolver, the kind that kills just as effectively as anything larger. He raises it, points it across the courtroom toward her, his hand shaking with adrenaline and rage. Chaos erupts. People scream. The bailiff draws his weapon. Judge Martinez stands so quickly her chair topples backward. Sophie Langford covers her face. The prosecutor dives behind the prosecutor's table. Dominic moves before thought arrives. He steps in front of Valentina, his body a shield, his arm sweeping her behind him in one fluid motion. His expression does not change. He does not flinch. He simply stands there, blocking the gun with his own chest. "Put the gun down," Dominic says. His voice is ice and death. "You have 5 seconds. Marcus laughs, a sound like breaking porcelain. "You think I'm scared of you? She owes me $200,000. She stole from me." "She doesn't owe you anything," Dominic says, each word a blade. "And she never stole from you. She ran from you. There's a difference." "I'll kill her." Marcus screams. "I'll kill both of you." The gun begins to rise. But before Marcus can adjust his aim, 2 shapes move through the panicking crowd like sharks through blood-clouded water. Marco emerges from the left side of the courtroom. Theo appears from the right. Both men are moving with the precision of those trained in violence. Marcus sees them half a second too late. Theo reaches him first, crossing the distance in full long strides. His hand, massive, scarred, belonging to a man who has done things that require forgetting, closes around Marcus's wrist. The gun fires once, the bullet shattering a light fixture in the ceiling, raining glass like snow. Theo twists with the mechanics of someone breaking a chicken's neck. Marcus screams. The gun clatters to the floor. Marco kicks it away, his movements economical and practiced. He drives his elbow downward, and Marcus's body crumples like a marionette with cut strings. His face hits the polished courtroom floor with a sound like meat striking tile. The bailiff rushes over, fumbling for his own gun, but Marco is already pulling Marcus's arms behind his back. Handcuffs click. Marcus is screaming, thrashing, his voice dissolving into incoherent rage and desperation. "I'm sorry," he shrieks. "I'm sorry. We can work this out. Please?" But no one is listening. Dominic does not release his grip on Valentina's arm. His attention is entirely on ensuring she remains behind him, protected, untouched. When federal officers flood through the doors, already staged outside, already waiting, they move with the efficiency of those who have been expecting violence. He finally turns to face her. "Are you hurt?" His eyes scan her body for wounds, for trauma, for anything that might require fixing. She shakes her head. She cannot speak. The relief is too enormous. The weight that has pressed down on her for days, for weeks, for 8 years, is finally lifting. That night, after the courthouse is cleared, after police statements are given, after Dominic's lawyers have spoken to federal agents, Valentina stands alone on the roof of her apartment building. November rain soaks through her thin jacket. Below, Los Angeles spreads like a circuit board of neon and darkness. Her $2 sits in her pocket, and she no longer needs it. She no longer needs anything except the understanding that she is still breathing, still alive, still here. Her phone buzzes. A text from Dominic, "Where are you? We need to talk. Please." That single word, please, carries the weight of 8 years. She sits down in the rain and cries until her body has no tears left. 2 days later, federal agents raid Marcus Webb's apartment at dawn. 12 men in tactical gear move through the building like ghosts. They are there because Dominic made a single phone call to a contact in the FBI. Not a threat. Merely an offering of evidence. Security records. Witness statements from 3 other women. Documented abuse spanning 7 years. The courthouse footage of a man pulling a gun in front of a judge. Marcus is dragged from his bed at 6 in the morning, slammed against the wall, cuffed before his eyes are even open. News cameras are already positioned outside. Dominic ensured that too. Every channel shows Marcus Webb perp walked in his boxers and a stained t-shirt, his face pressed against the hood of a federal vehicle. His mouth moves silently, begging, promising, breaking. The charges read like a catalogue of his crimes: assault with a deadly weapon, domestic violence across state lines, conspiracy with corrupt officers, attempted murder. 40 years. Federal prison. No possibility of parole. The corrupt cops fall with him. Fired. Charged. Publicly destroyed. Marcus will grow old in a cell, forgotten, while the women he hurt rebuild their lives in the light. Sophie Langford's destruction takes a different form. When Dominic's lawyers release the security footage showing her planting the bracelet, her carefully constructed life crumbles within hours. Charity boards remove her. Her country club revokes her membership. Friends who once called her closest confidant now cross streets to avoid her. She is convicted of filing a false report, perjury, fraud. 3 years in federal prison. $100,000 in fines. On the day she is led from the courthouse in an orange jumpsuit, her blonde hair unwashed and graying at the roots, Valentina stands across the street watching. Dominic stands beside her, his hand resting gently on her back. "Do you feel better?" he asks. Valentina considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. "I feel like justice happened." "That's different than better." "Yeah," he says softly. "It is. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life." That sentence hung in the air of Dominic Calabrese's study like smoke that refused to clear. Marcus Webb was gone now, 40 years in a federal cell, each day identical to the last, the walls closing in the same way his hands had closed around Valentina's throat 8 years ago. Sophie Langford was gone too, 3 years served, her blonde hair graying in an orange jumpsuit, her country club friends crossing streets to avoid her name. Justice did not erase what happened. It simply stopped it from happening again. 3 weeks after the trial, Valentina stood in that same study where she had cleaned marble floors invisible for 8 years. But this time her feet did not move in the practiced silence of someone who belonged nowhere. She stood still, centered, wearing a black dress that actually fit her body instead of hanging like an apology. Her hair fell down her back, and her shoulders, scarred, resilient, held the weight of a person who had learned to stop shrinking. Dominic sat behind his desk, and for once the desk between them felt less like a barrier than like shared ground. "I want to offer you something," he said. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty, the sound of a man used to being obeyed. "A position. Head of household staff. Triple your previous salary. An apartment in one of my buildings, heat that works, locks that are new, windows that don't rattle in the wind." Valentina's hands trembled slightly. After everything, trembling still happened. "Why me?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "You could hire someone with experience, credentials, training." "I don't need credentials," Dominic said, rising from his chair and moving toward her with deliberate steps. "I need someone who doesn't flinch when things get hard. Someone who runs toward danger instead of away from it." Someone who sees a child in peril and doesn't calculate the cost of helping. He stopped close enough that she could hear the brush of his expensive suit against itself. "That's you, Valentina." She turned away from him then, unable to hold his gaze. Her hands moved to the zipper of her dress with the kind of vulnerability that takes years to earn. She lifted her hair and slowly drew the zipper down just enough to show her shoulder blades to the light filtering through the mansion windows. The scars were there. All 17 of them. Pale against her brown skin. A map written in violence, each one a night when she tried to be smaller, quieter, more invisible, thinking that if she disappeared enough, Marcus Webb's rage would have nothing to grip. It never worked. The scars proved that. The sound Dominic made, a sharp, sudden intake of breath like a man struck, told her everything about what he saw. Not pity. Never pity. But recognition. The acknowledgement of survival itself. "Valentina," he began, but she sipped the dress and turned to face him, needing him to see not her scars but her eyes. "You showed me your father's photograph," she said quietly. "You told me about the worst night of your life. How he died. How you've spent 20 years building walls so high nothing could touch you. This is mine. 17 scars. One for each time I tried to be smaller, thinking that would save me. It never did." She stepped closer, and her voice grew steady, like a blade wrapped in ice becoming simply a blade. "You asked me once why I stepped between those men and your nephew in that garage. Because I know what it's like to be helpless. I'll never let someone else feel that if I can stop it. And I won't be quiet about it anymore. I won't be invisible anymore. Not for anyone." Dominic crossed to her, and his movements were careful, deliberate, as if approaching something precious and fragile that might shatter if he moved too fast. His hand lifted to her face, and his thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. His fingers were warm. Safe. A novelty she was still learning to recognize. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he said. "I'm not." "You are," he interrupted, and the certainty in his voice left no room for argument. "The night you stood between the gun and Ava's cousin, I'd spent 20 years building an empire so high and so fortified that nothing could touch me. But watching you, this woman with no power and no protection, just deciding that someone needed help and acting, it broke something open I thought had died with my father. You reminded me what courage actually looks like. Real courage. Not the kind you build with money or fear or men in suits. The kind that costs everything and doesn't calculate." He kissed her then, and it was gentle, a question and an answer simultaneously. When they pulled apart, Valentina was crying differently than before. Not from fear. From relief. From the strange, fragile sensation of being seen. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Be someone who matters. Be someone important enough to be loved like this." "You've always mattered," Dominic said softly. "You just needed someone to see you." That someone arrived at the mansion 4 days later. Ava was 7 years old, dark-haired like her father, with his careful way of observing people before trusting them. She peered around Dominic's leg at Valentina, her small frame uncertain, testing the waters of this woman who now lived in her father's home. "Papa says you're a hero," Ava said finally, her voice carrying the serious tone of a child stating facts. Valentina knelt to her level, her knees cracking slightly from years of work, from the weight of survival. "I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I'm just someone who tries to help." "That's what a hero is," Ava said with absolute conviction, and then she hugged Valentina. Brief. Simple. Devastating in its innocence. Over the child's dark head, Valentina met Dominic's eyes, and what she saw there, gratitude, affection, something deeper taking root like spring after a brutally long winter, made her believe, for the first time, that maybe she deserved something good. That survival itself wasn't the highest achievement she could reach. That there could be joy beyond it. 6 months later, Valentina walked through the mansion corridors, but the air around her had changed. Staff greeted her by name with genuine respect. She had hired 3 new women, all from situations like hers, giving them the chance no one had given her. A second-shift waitress. A woman fleeing her abusive ex-husband. A teenager whose mother had died and left her with nothing but rage and intelligence. Valentina trained them herself, showed them how to carry their heads high, taught them that invisibility was a choice they never had to make again. She carried the worn prayer card in her pocket now. The one Marcus demanded back 7 years ago. The one she never returned. That card sat in a drawer in Dominic's study next to a new photograph, her and Dominic at Ava's school play, his arm around her shoulders, both of them genuinely smiling. In the photo, she was no longer small. Her shoulders were back. Her chin was raised. She looked like a woman who had traveled through fire and come out the other side. The night Dominic took her to the balcony, November rain was falling again, softer this time, gentler. The city lights below were blurred and beautiful, the darkness held at bay by 1,000 windows glowing gold. He took her hand in his, kissed her knuckles with the reverence usually reserved for prayer. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That a year ago I had $2 in my pocket," she said. "Just 2. And scars I thought would define me forever. Scars I thought meant I was broken, defective, ruined. And now I have," she gestured at the city below, at the mansion behind them, at the life spreading out before them both. "Everything." "You always had everything," Dominic said quietly, pulling her closer as the rain fell. "You just couldn't see it yet. Courage. Strength. A heart that runs toward danger when it matters. I just gave you the space to use what was already there." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and in that moment, with the November rain falling like a benediction and the city lights blurred and beautiful, she finally understood something the legal system had taken months to prove: she had never been nobody. She had just needed someone to see her. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. If you're in a situation where you feel powerless, where someone makes you believe you're nothing, please know this. You are not nothing. You are everything. And somewhere, someone is waiting to see you the way Valentina was finally seen. Don't give up. Not yet. Drop a like if this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe so you don't miss the stories of courage and redemption that are coming. Comment below and tell me about a time someone saw you when you felt invisible. Your story matters. I'll be reading every one. We wish you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. See you in the next story.